Alan Wake 2 is now imminent, and I have just recently completed the game for the very first time, so I'm here to share my initial thoughts and impressions with you. But I want to say up front, I will not be discussing any specifics of the story. There's going to be a lot of spoiler-heavy lore analysis videos coming from us down the line, but to be honest, I need a lot more time with the game before I feel totally confident discussing the story in depth. Now, I will be showing some gameplay, but only from areas that have already been featured in trailers, and I won't be showing any cutscenes or anything that I think could give away anything significant about the story. We know that Saga Anderson and her partner Alex Casey are in Washington, while Alan Wake is in the Dark Place. And that's about all that you should be able to ascertain from the clips that you're going to see in this review. Of course, I'm very excited to talk about these characters and what they experience throughout the game, but that's going to come in another video. Instead, this review is going to focus on the gameplay, graphics, mechanics, sound, and the overall stability of the game as I experienced it. I want to thank the folks at Remedy for giving review copies of the game to our channel, and I want to thank our supporters over on Patreon for their support. Even $1 a month goes a really long way for us, so if you are in a position to help the channel grow, and you want to do so, check out the link down below this video to check out the Patreon and hop on board. Now, there's a few things I want to say before I get too deep into this review. First of all, I am playing on PC, and I'm really not a very tech-savvy gamer, but here are my PC specs for anyone who's curious. The version of the game that I played was an early press build, and it did have a few issues that I was warned about. However, those issues have since been patched out. I did encounter a few other bugs that may not have been patched out yet, but I'll discuss all that stuff in detail a little later on. I mostly played with a controller, but I will say that keyboard and mouse are totally viable for this game. And the whole experience probably took me around 25 hours to complete, and I did miss a few items and small areas in the game for the sake of getting this review out on time. But I definitely intend to go back in and attempt to 100% complete the game, especially now that there's been a New Game Plus mode recently announced. It's obvious that I'm a huge Remedy fan, but I'm also very comfortable being critical of their output. And there was a lot of skepticism surrounding the idea of adding a new protagonist into this series. And unfortunately, there was also a lot of racially antagonistic rhetoric surrounding the casting of Saga Anderson. I don't mean to get too far off topic here, but I do think it's relevant, and I want to say that I am aware that there's a trend of taking old media and remaking it where you take the straight white male leads and replace them with anything other than a straight white male. I've spoken about my personal feelings on this trend on the channel before, and generally speaking, it really doesn't bother me. But I do think that sometimes these decisions come from a very disingenuous place. We have corporations out there trying to look progressive by making media that features strong minority protagonists. But those same corporations have ethics and practices that are often bigoted, classist, and predatory. I think it should be obvious when a corporation is just pandering, because the political views of the corporation or of the people who make up that corporation are usually antithetical to the sort of progressive messages that are being forced into their products. This sort of hypocrisy is very prevalent in pop culture lately, and we're also in a very tumultuous time when it comes to racial and cultural tension. All this combined leads to a situation where anytime a minority is cast in a lead role, there are cries of it being some sort of diversity hire, or that the company is bowing to some sort of woke agenda. And personally speaking, I think that most of that outcry is rooted more in bigotry than anything else, but I do try to take people at face value and give them the benefit of the doubt when I can. Also, I know that that type of corporate pandering, coming from a very disingenuous place, is a real thing that does happen. I've had way too many people showing up in my comments section, leaving very racially motivated comments about Alan Woke and the woke agenda, and all I want to say is that I think Alan Wake 2 as a game and a piece of art should really transcend all those sorts of criticisms. I experienced nothing in the game that felt like pandering or just forcing different types of people in it to fill some sort of checklist or quota. Characters are well written, realistic, and all of the performances are very strong. I also have never seen Remedy do anything as a company that would make me think of them as being anything less than genuine and caring toward their staff and toward their fans. I want to believe that people who play the game will recognize this the same way I did, but I fully expect there to be some people out there looking to capitalize on some sort of fake outrage. Don't believe those people and don't listen to them. All they really want to do is profit from fear and ignorance. And I think that when a corporation is being fake progressive, we should call them out. But it's stupid and bigoted to call every minority that is cast in any big work a diversity hire. Now, I'm really only bringing this up because I've had so many comments like this show up, both when I'm browsing online, looking at discourse on the game, but also on my own videos here on the channel over the past year or so that I've been covering Alan Wake 2. And I just don't want to leave it ambiguous where I stand on these issues because it's been kind of shoved in my face so many times while getting ready to play and review this game. So that's out of the way. Let's just talk about the f***ing game now. Like I said, I'm not going to go into any specifics about the story, but I do want to say that I think the game does a really great job of welcoming totally new players into the Remedy connected universe. Saga Anderson is totally new to that universe, and acts as a sort of analog for players who are coming to the games for the first time. But if you're a fan of Control, Alan Wake, or all of the other Remedy games, the story will definitely do a lot to excite you as well. I don't think that it's at all necessary to have played any other Remedy game before this one in order to enjoy it. And if Alan Wake 2 is your first Remedy game, you'll have a lot of fun going back through their catalog and seeing how everything connects. Remedy definitely doubled down on their official boundaries of the RCU here. This game is in direct continuity with Alan Wake, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, and Control. And I think it's very likely that by the time we play Control 2, we'll have seen that Alan Wake 2 helped to set the stage for Jesse Faden's next adventure. Sam Lake and Remedy have said that Max Payne and Quantum Break are not included in the RCU, but if you are a big fan of those games, Remedy did not forget you when it comes to Alan Wake 2, and that's all I'm really going to say on the topic for now. If you're a fan of survival horror, you'll know what to expect from most of the gameplay in Alan Wake 2. Remedy tackles the genre in a manner that stays true to the hallmarks of survival horror, as have been established in series like Resident Evil and The Evil Within. The game definitely took some cues from the recent Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remakes when it comes to the overall feel of controlling your character, as well as some of the basic systems like inventory and quick slots. Weapons, abilities, and inventory space can be upgraded. There are safe rooms with persistent boxes that can hold your excess items. It has most of the things that you've come to expect from survival horror, but the game also makes an effort to carve out its own identity in that genre. There's no combining or inspecting of key items, you won't be mixing any herbs, and you won't be pausing combat to arrange your inventory. Instead, Alan Wake 2 has a bit more urgency in its combat, forcing players to do things like heal in real time. The first Alan Wake game has been commonly criticized for having repetitive combat, and a lot of people didn't like how often you'd lose all of your weapons, or how Alan couldn't run for more than a few meters without doubling over and gasping for air. Alan Wake 2 addresses all of those things. Firstly, there's no stamina meter. You can sprint for as long as you want without penalty. There's also a really solid variety of enemy types and bosses, and fewer combat encounters overall when compared to the first game. I played on normal difficulty, and while I did have a few spots where I died maybe 2 or 3 times before successfully clearing that area, I found the level of challenge to be appropriate for me. The game offers a hard mode in case you want more of a challenge, and a story mode in case you want to just focus on the story. Combat in Alan Wake 2 is somewhat similar to the first game and American Nightmare. You use light to break away an enemy's shield, and then you attack them. The game adds a few new moves to the repertoire, allowing for players to recover or get the upper hand in ways that are more than just firing a gun or holding a flare. I won't mention these specifically, but they're a lot of fun to play with. To me, the frequency of enemy encounters feels similar to something like the 2002 Resident Evil remake. There are areas where you'll encounter swarms of enemies, and other areas might have one or two stronger enemies to face, but a large portion of the game is spent exploring and solving puzzles. There's a lot of quiet time in the game, which can either be very peaceful or incredibly tense, depending on where you're at in the story. Exploration really is rewarded in this game, and almost all of the collectibles that you find have tangible rewards that will really benefit your character. Progression in the game is tied to exploration and deconstruction of what you find as you explore. The game has some mandatory puzzles and key hunting, but it also has a number of optional puzzles to take on. The difficulty range of these optional puzzles is all over the place. Several of them had me breaking out a pen and paper and a calculator to solve. In contrast, most of the mandatory puzzles you had to solve to progress were never all that difficult for me, but personally, I kind of like when a game makes me stop for a few minutes and kind of think things over before I can progress. I have played way too many games that required me to look up a guide to solve some of the puzzles. This isn't like that at all, for me at least, but I think it's a good degree of challenge if you give it time and really mull over the puzzles and don't just go for the guide the second you get stuck. In general, I found all of the puzzles to be very well designed, and they really give you everything you need to solve them, even if the answers aren't immediately apparent. Like I said earlier, exploration is important in this game, and overall, it definitely is Remedy's largest game world. You have several different hub maps to explore, and within each hub, there are several different areas, paths, and buildings, often with their own sizable sub-maps. The game is split up into different missions and chapters in a way that is very similar to Control. While you almost always have the option to go to a different hub map or switch between Saga and Alan, you can only do so at certain points on the map, meaning that you might have to get through a particular area or mission before you're able to make your way back to the places on the map where you can swap characters or head out to a different hub. Personally, I found myself switching between Saga and Alan every time I was given the opportunity to do so, but there's definitely no right or wrong way to play through these campaigns. And I do think that people might lean more toward one or the other depending on what they like more, because both campaigns have very distinct feels. When you're playing as Saga, you really feel and see the events of the game affecting the world around you, and when you're playing as Alan, you really feel the contrast between reality and the dark place. Both campaigns feature interesting and well-written characters, and there's a lot to experience overall. I would have been happy playing either of these as standalone experiences, but combining them and intertwining their stories just works so well. My time between both campaigns was pretty evenly split, and I'd say it'll take most players between 8 and 12 hours to complete each campaign. Of course, this being a Remedy game, there's a ton of documents, radio and television broadcasts, and Easter eggs to find. The game is really nowhere near as dense as Control or Quantum Break when it comes to the readable documents, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to discover. It's difficult to really quantify this without checking stats, but it feels like Alan Wake has less of these documents and broadcasts and things than some of the other games, but the ones you do find feel so much more substantial than previous games have felt, like in terms of the production, presentation, and the overall impact that these materials have on the plot and on the Remedy connected universe. It's also all implemented in such a natural way. The things that you discover always feel diegetic and believable in the context of the game and its story, and I feel like Remedy really struck a good balance in dispersing information to the player between dialogue, documents, environmental storytelling, and cutscenes, which is something that I feel some of their other games kind of struggled with. Like, I loved reading through all the documents in Control and Quantum Break, but at the same time, it felt like they interrupted the pacing of the game for me, and I never really had that feeling in Alan Wake 2. Nearly everything you pick up, read, watch, or listen to pushes the story or the actual gameplay further in some way. The game features an interactive menu where you can walk around a space and read manuscript pages or review other things that you've picked up. And while I do appreciate how it all looks and feels, these sorts of interactive menus can become kind of cumbersome after a while. This interactive menu has been referred to as the Writer's Room for Alan and the Mind Place for Saga. You can access this at almost any time at the press of a button, and you'll instantly appear there. This doesn't pause the game, so you want to be sure that you're in a safe space whenever you're doing this. If you hold the button instead of pressing it, you'll bring up a sort of quick view version of that interactive menu that doesn't require you to walk around. Instead, you can quickly toggle through the different parts of the menu. Having these two different options for how you interact with the menu is a great way to allow players to think and move at their own pace, while still having the menu be a diegetic thing that works in terms of the characters and their relationship to the story. The first thing that I want to say about the graphics in this game is that everything you're seeing here, everything I captured, has been on the low graphics preset. Despite having a 4070, I couldn't run this game at high or medium while also capturing footage. Initially, I was kind of bummed out, but after a few minutes, I realized that Alan Wake 2's low settings are miles ahead of the ultra settings on many other games that I've played. In part, this is due to the overall realism and fidelity of the graphics, but I think that a larger part of it is the art direction. Remedy uses lighting, weather effects, visual effects, and props to present previously traversed areas in new ways. A certain degree of backtracking is a core part of survival horror. You'll find inaccessible areas all throughout the maps, and the keys to unlocking those areas might take you a while to find. By the time you trek back to those areas, they have the potential to look and feel drastically different from how you last saw them. Remedy have always reused maps and levels in their games, and I think that they have continued to find ways to make that not only exciting for players, but also relevant to a game's plot. Alan Wake 2 really pulls this off, and it's impressive to me that I was able to go back through some areas a few times over without it ever feeling cheap or tired. The visual effects used in the game are really very impressive, and there is some seamless integration of live action stuff woven all throughout the game. There were several points where I really wasn't sure if I was seeing live actors or not. The shifting nature of the oldest house in Control is a great appetizer for the sort of mind-bending changes to environments that you'll witness in Alan Wake 2. Each time a scene changes, there's so much attention to detail that makes it feel very distinct from whatever you were just previously looking at. That level of detail and artistry is also very present in the sound design and score for the game. Weapons sound great and powerful. Ambient noises from the environment, NPCs, and enemies are very lush and immersive, and the whole game is filled with tons of new music that really accentuates everything else that you're looking at and experiencing. The inclusion of custom written songs made specifically for the game was a great choice in my opinion. I thought that I would miss hearing some previously released licensed music like was in Remedy's last few games. But Alan Wake 2 has such a wide variety of voices and genres in its score and soundtrack that I really didn't think twice about it once I actually got into the game. I mentioned earlier that I was playing an early press build of the game, and when I got my key, they warned me about a few potential issues and bugs that I might face. Well, I faced all of the bugs and issues that I could have, but thankfully Remedy was right there with workarounds and backup save files to help me get through it, and of course, all that stuff has already been patched out, so it's not really anything worth discussing. I did experience one crash, and one instance of the game kind of just going black after I tried to load a save, and then I'd pause and it would look normal, and I'd unpause and the screen was black, but that just happened once and I just exited the game, started over, and it worked, so who knows. I also encountered an area where the floor didn't properly load as I entered a doorway, and so I fell through the map. I was able to duplicate this bug once, but when I visited the same area a third time, it didn't happen. I'm assuming that I either had some lag in loading that area the first couple times I went there, or it was just patched out by the time I went back a third time. I encountered one other bug like this. I got stuck in a room that I wasn't actually supposed to be able to enter because as I approached it, the door just didn't load in time, so I got kind of stuck in a first-person view. It was weird, but I went to do it again and recreate the bug. I couldn't. And when I went back again after I closed the game and saved and everything, it was gone. So either that's a rare bug or a loading issue or just something that was already patched out. Graphical issues overall were pretty rare for me. I had one instance where a small area of the game had my flashlight beam looking like a little diamond shape instead of the beam, as if the light object was there but the lighting effect wasn't rendering. But it was only for one small section of the game and it never happened again. So again, I don't know. Is it a bug, or is it something that was patched out, or is it my thing not loading fast enough? Hard to say. Other than that, the game really did perform pretty well. I experienced a bit of stuttering a few times throughout the game, but I mean like 3 or 4 times over the course of 25 or so hours. I had this happen going out of or into a cutscene once or twice, and there was also one small section of the game, a kind of visually intensive section it seemed, where Saga's mind place transition, it usually takes only 1 frame. This was taking like 3 or 4 seconds. So it was noticeably jarring to have to wait a second, but it was very rare. These things happened a few times over the course of about 25 or 26 hours. I really didn't experience any significant frame rate drops that I could perceive, and I had a little bit of texture pop in on a couple scenes. Again, maybe like 2 or 3 scenes where there was a really long draw distance, but that was really rare. And I saw maybe 2 or 3 lower, like noticeably lower resolution textures, but those were like small objects that I was really zooming in on and looking at very closely on low settings. And when I put that on high settings or even medium, those textures looked very crisp. So I can't say I really had too many issues, just a few minor bugs, but nothing that really impeded my overall enjoyment of the game. It did take me a little tweaking to get up and running on my system, but that's just PC gaming for you. You might have to try different options, and thankfully the game has, as I'm showing you now, a bunch of different options for graphics and presentation. To be honest, I don't know what most of this stuff means, but in my opinion, the game looked great on default low settings. There is no option to change the field of view, which I know is something that might be disappointing for some players, but I also think that the field of view the game currently has is intentionally set, and it's good for a survival horror game like this. Motion blur and film grain can be turned off, and overall it seems like players should generally be able to tailor the look and feel of the game to their liking. Now, the game definitely pushed my computer to its limits, especially when I ran the game on higher graphics settings. But it also looks more advanced than many of the other games I've played in the past 10 or so years. Environments are so dense with objects, different types of lighting, debris, different character models, structures, and textures, and everything is prone to completely changing instantly through various mechanics that you'll experiment with throughout the game. It's an incredibly layered experience, not only in terms of the visuals and level design, but also the narrative. I mean, there is really a lot to chew on here. As much as I love this game, I do have one major complaint that I need to bring up, and I'm trying to be as critical and objective as possible. And so when you go to a safe room, you can use the thermos there to save your game. You can quick save or open one of 3 manual save slots. There are also points in the game where you'll hit a checkpoint and the game will auto-save. So if you die, shortly after that, you'll bounce back to the checkpoint instead of your last safe room you were in. Now, this works pretty well for most of the game, but there are a few intense enemy encounters that come right after mandatory dialogue scenes. So I got in a few situations throughout the entire game where I would go into a really intense battle, die, get bounced back to the safe room because there was no checkpoint, I'd have to go through these mandatory dialogues again, and it kind of just really messed with the pacing of the game for me. This didn't happen a lot. It was, again, I keep saying 2 or 3 times, but most of these instances were about 2 or 3 times throughout the entire course of the game. But when it happened, it was a real drag on the action and the pacing and my enjoyment of the game, because hearing these kind of really well written, really well performed dialogues, awesome. Hearing them when you're trying to get ready for an intense battle and then you die and you got to go through all this again, and it might take like 3-4 minutes just to get back to a checkpoint, basically. It's something that I feel like could have been balanced a bit better, but I also have to acknowledge that this is a kind of unique issue, because depending on your skill level or the difficulty level that you're playing the game on, you might never run into this kind of issue. So it's something that I personally had kind of a gripe about, but who knows, maybe you will never experience anything like that in your time with Alan Wake 2. Now, I'd love to offer some more, deeper criticisms and complaints about the game, but to be honest, I don't really have any. The game is really, really good, in my opinion. Now, if you're not a fan of survival horror, Alan Wake 2 is going to be a really tough sell, because it is a survival horror game through and through. And the game, it has the, backtracking, the items, the puzzles, the whole thing, the combat, the enemy encounters. If you played Resident Evil 2, 3, or 4, these remakes, or The Evil Within, you didn't like it, you're not going to like this game. Now, if you are a hardcore Remedy fan who just doesn't like survival horror, story mode might be the way to go, because it'll let you bypass a lot of the more, frustrating parts of the game in terms of the combat and some of the things that you might find kind of difficult about the navigation when you're dealing with these kind of tough enemy encounters and all the tension and fear. But beware, the game is very violent, dark, it's very gory, but at the same time, there are great moments of levity and humor, and all that really allows for pressure to kind of build and release in a very natural way. So you never get kind of like so tense that you gotta put the game down and walk away from it, because as soon as you hit that point, there's a kind of a pressure release and you get to experience something else for a little while as the tension rises again. The game also has this sort of like fearless, unapologetic weirdness to it that I usually think about, when I see games from Suda51 or Hideo Kojima, who just kind of, like unapologetically stick to their guns on these like really out there ideas. Alan Wake 2, man, I don't want to say anything specific, but Remedy has been leaning into that stuff the whole time. Even in Max Payne 1, there's a couple, fourth wall breaking moments and moments of humor and these weird scenes, and in Control, they really doubled down on that stuff. But Alan Wake 2 is Remedy at their absolute weirdest, and it really works, in my opinion. Knowing that there's more to this game coming through the free DLC and the 2 paid DLC episodes has me extremely excited. And I don't mean to get too far ahead of myself, but after experiencing what Alan Wake 2 has accomplished, it makes me so awestruck by the potential of Control 2 and the Max Payne remakes. The Northlight engine is really doing some wild stuff, and the sort of surreal nature of those games of Control and, Max Payne 1 and 2, if you haven't played, there's a lot of crazy sequences, dream sequences, and things that are going to look so nice in the Northlight engine. So Remedy really accomplished something special here, and I think that if this game goes well, it could really raise their profile overall. Beyond that, I'm just so impressed that they were actually able to get this game made, and that they had the ambition to hold on to this dream for over a decade. 13 years is a really long time for a game to be conceptualized and then put on the back burner, canceled. Who knows how many times it was pitched and canceled. I know a few of those stories have come out over the years, but it's a game that has gone through so much to get where it is now. That sort of thing is rare in any sort of, big budget art, whether it's film or video games or whatever. But it's even more rare to see not only the passion and drive, but to see it actually come to fruition at the end of the line, like, it's just wild. I think of the Oddworld games having a similar sort of really, really tough go at keeping the dream alive over the course of many, many years. So, hats off to Remedy for hanging on to this idea and delivering what I think is a really, really good game. I don't like to give games ratings, but I would say I strongly recommend you play it. Of course, I'm really excited for you, viewer, to experience the game. Please let me know down below what you're thinking about the game. Have you already played it? Are you preloading it now? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Let's talk about it in the comments, or if you want to talk further about Alan Wake 2 as you play it, you can join us in the Hidden Machine Discord. We have a Alan Wake 2 spoilers channel there, so you can freely talk about the game and your experiences with some other passionate Remedy nerds, and we'll have plenty more videos coming out soon, both about, non-Remedy related games and a bunch of stuff about Alan Wake 2. I'm very excited to start making more videos and talking about this, but like I said, I gotta play the game like 2 or 3 more times to really get a grip on everything I experienced, because it does a number on you. That's all I'm gonna say. So until next time, see ya.